Hello, everyone. Today, I wanted to walk through my latest image with you and just a little bit about how I created it, how I put it all together, from the outfit to the shoot to what it looked like and what it became. This image was all about courage, which maybe doesn't look it on the surface, but I tried to use different elements to make me feel a little bit like a warrior, maybe a little courageous, not creative, courageous. Um, so that meant to me making myself feel good about myself. So I went with a floor length velvet dress, which is not practical for 90-degree heat. I threw a little stole I had around my neck. I decided for this that I wanted very earthy tones, and since my hair for this shoe was a very bright red, I put on a brown wig so that you couldn't see the red hair. So I just kept everything in those natural tones. And let me kind of back out of this and show you what it started with. I do have horns on my head, but they're very, very tiny. So they're kind of cool little devil horns. I think I picked them up at the Goodwill for a couple bucks, brand new. So that was kind of neat. But I wanted something much more powerful. I wanted to show the power of courage in everyday life. I'm not out here fighting any wars, battling any diseases. So I'm not doing big fights that maybe other people in your lives or even yourself are doing on a daily basis. But we all have our trials, our tribulations, great and small, that we do deal with. And so this image was very much about me creating a character of how I see that courage that you can pull from within yourself, right? How you can be as a woman and as a man too, sorry, you can be elegant, you can be beautiful, but you can also be very, very powerful. And so that's what this image was supposed to be about. And I never quite know how it's going to turn out when I start it, but this is how it started. And what you see is me on my very sad, sparse lawn, with all kinds of little dead spots over here. There's a very large tree in my yard, and so it casts these beautiful shadows at different points in the day. So this was a little later in the afternoon, so I did have a lot of space and sunlight to work with, but I'm very careful about where the shadows are to try not to get them across my face. Sometimes I fail at that, but this time it worked out. You can see my DJI drone trigger right there next to me, and I shot this with a DJI Mavic 3 Classic drone. So that's what's hovering above me, and it has this amazing little Hasselblad camera on it, and so that's how I actually physically shot it. So if we come over here to our vast layers panel, the first thing you would see in here is that, let me turn these things off, is that I had to do some compositing. And I say had to because, yes, it is within me fundamentally to do compositing when I work. There are a couple things about this image that I actually didn't originally like, and one thing that I still very much dislike. I hate that I didn't turn my foot straighter, and when I looked at every single image I had, my foot was not straight in any of them. So I had a couple options. One, I could leave it as is and just, twitch a little bit when I look at this image. Or two, I could try to do something to straighten it out. So I actually chose to leave it as is, and I do twitch when I see this image because it drives me nuts when I don't have a shot or a piece of my body that I can swap out. I actually didn't quite like my hands at first, but I believe I kept them in. So some of the first things I did are just cleaning up the image. So I can't even tell you what this first one does, but I go in and I get rid of that drone trigger. That's one of the first things I always do because it is always next to me. So the way that it works is my drone has a timer in it. So every 5 seconds, that's what I set it to, it takes a picture. So I have my trigger right next to me so I can start it, I can stop it. So basically I bring the drone up, I get into place, I set my focus. I've got all my settings already set before I even bring the drone off the ground, and I just start taking pictures. And so that trigger is in every one of my shots in case I need to move something. It was actually windy on this day, and I could hear the drone struggling a little bit. It was trying to stay directly above me, so it does a wonderful job of doing that. But that trigger is always in my shots, so the first thing I do is I get rid of it, which is very simple. I usually clone it out in, either clone or erase in some way. So whatever works best for you, that's what I typically do. I then, I had made this square and filled in the side because I wanted it to be centered. And the picture I posted online, I actually cropped in a little bit more and got me closer to it. But, I centered myself, and I also get rid of a couple of leaves that were just a little distracting. And so those are just the cleanup things. I didn't have a lot to do on this picture, and I didn't actually composite any hands or feet this time, which is very rare for me. The biggest thing I did is I was struggling with this, looking at it and going, it doesn't quite convey the message. I had already written out my message. So I knew that my message was about that internal struggle and that courage that you have. But I had not figured out how I was going to make this look yet. So I played around with the horns and I made them larger. And I will zoom in here. I didn't do this like masterful job at it. I just made them larger, right? So you can see they're overlapping with the original horns. If I click this off, you get the original little headpiece that I have. And then you have this ridiculousness that's all stretched out. But I like the initial look of it. So I thought, well, I'm going to play with this a little bit. So I did some liquefying. I moved them around. And then this next layer, just all this did was get rid of, just cloned out the horns in the back, the original horns. And then I started burning down around because now I made the horns bigger, but I had no shadow. So it looked like it looks like a very fake element. So if you're compositing, if you're adding elements, always remember that, if you've got a shadow, use that same basic principle and create the shadow that you need, right? So on this side of my image, I can see the shadow on my arm over here. So I did the same basic thing. On this side, same with the right side, and just added some deep shadow in. I just did a couple of layers of that until it got to a point where it looked not quite so fake. I am not the best at this, so go easy on me. I'm sure there are so many other people that do this so much better, but I did add a little bit of shadow in there to make it not look like it was just hovering, this big fake element. I then, let me just scroll up here, came in and I darkened. So if you look kind of right in here, you're going to see that I just started burning down. I started darkening some of the elements in here, right? So there's just some darkness in there. And then what I did, so this is an interesting layer right here. So then what I did is I actually took this entire element, right? This entire headpiece, and I brought it out and saved it as a JPEG and brought it into the Topaz Labs sharpening tool. And I really wanted to try to tone down this blur, right? Not motion blur, but blur from making this a very large object from a very small one. So I have this Topaz Labs sharpening tool, which comes in handy if you miss your focus. In this case, I actually am creating an element that I just stretched out, right? And I didn't really put much thought into it. I just stretched it out, and then I thought, well, what can I do to make this look a little bit better? Again, there's probably much better ways to do this than I did, but this is the route that I took. So I brought it out into that sharpening tool, ran the sharpening tool, played with it, tweaked it a little bit, and then brought the element back in, and this is what it looked like. right? So I actually went from very, very blurry to kind of over sharpened and crisp to get some detail in there. Now, we are zoomed way into this. If I zoom back out, it looks a heck of a lot better, right? And you might not even notice it too much. But one of the things that also did when I zoomed out that I actually particularly loved was not that it looked less stretched out, but that it kind of toned down those highlights and muted it a little bit, and it brought it in line more with the lighting of the rest of the picture. So I thought, you know what, that was worth it. I'm gonna keep it like that. So I call this whole group, this is my composite group, right? So this is before any of my compositing elements, and this is after. So typically you don't have cleanup in there, but since my cleanup was really just getting rid of the drone trigger and a couple of leaves, I kind of left it all and grouped it together into this composite group. So now that I have what I call a good base image, right? This is my good base image I'm starting with. Then I start on my arduous journey for color. And what did I want? So I did very earthy tones that I was wearing, golds, browns, everything, about it. I even have a tan, so it works out. So what do I want for color on this? So I start playing around, and one of the tools that I use is I have a lot of actions by the Color Lab. So if you're into actions about color, there's so many out there. I use several different actions. So I own actions from the Color Lab. And I have a set that includes this one, which is called Renaissance. And so if I click this on, it will, there we go. I was like, it will do nothing. It will severely darken down my image, and it keeps the gold tones pretty well, turned my lighter greens into some darker greens. And I thought, okay, this is a good start, right? This is where I want to start. I've got it on a 90% opacity. And if I open this up just to show you, there are so many layers in here, and you can make certain adjustments with them. So this one you can see on the mask that I did. And then I turned the whole thing off because I didn't like what I did. So you can turn things on and off, and you can really kind of customize each of the actions. If you don't use actions, you can kind of customize everything within them. You can mask out certain pieces, which I do a lot. So this one I just kind of ran, and then I decided, because this is what I do when I shoot drone shots, I usually have pretty flat light. So the yard that I shoot in is surrounded by my house and very, very tall trees, like extremely old tall trees. So I can't get wonderful directional sunlight. I do have some, as you can see from the shadow. There's a little bit of directional light, but a lot of times when you're shooting these things, your elements look a little flat because you're shooting from the drone. And there's no light on the drone. It's just, capturing the scene as it is. So I always add in more directional lighting in the same direction that my sun is coming in. Now, if I'm shooting at noon, which a lot of times I do, then I get to decide where I want my sunshine to come from. But because I already had sun coming in, you'll see in this little curves layer, and all this is a curves layer, is that I added in some directional lighting in the same place the sun was coming from. And it doesn't look like much, right? It's just a little bit dark, like lightened up right through here. And then I did a little bit more because I wanted to light up the horns, which are now in the shadows. So we lit up just a little bit right here, right? So I've just got a little bit more light on here. So that's some of the directional lighting that I'll add in as I go. So one of the other toolkits that I own is I own Infinite Radiance, which is put out by Infinite Tools, and they have a whole bunch of different tools, and I love them all. There's tools to unify skin, there are color tools, there's this radiance one, which also works with color. So there's black and white. I mean, there's so many. And for each of my images, I go through and I play with each of the tools that I own, and I see what's going to work best. So for this one, I actually used some Infinite Radiance on it, and I'm going to click on this, and we're going to see bug flying around my mouth, but very slight color change in the greens. So let me turn it off. You like can't even see it. I'll turn it back on. So very subtle tones. A lot of times when I'm doing something, a lot of things I do might be very, very, very subtle. But at the time I think, oh my gosh, yes, that's the exact tiny tweak that I needed. So I'm going to move on, and I renamed this one, but I get into another tool set. So again, I own a lot of tools around color correction, or defining what you want your color to be. And I do that because if you've seen my work, you see that I create these crazy colors, and all I'm doing is shooting in my backyard. And my backyard does not have red grass or orange grass, or even this beautiful, forest green type grass. So I have to create these colors, and there's a gazillion ways you can do it in Photoshop, but people much smarter than me have developed these awesome tools, and so I take advantage of them. So the next tool set that I would tell you I use is it's, oh my gosh, I'm just blanking. So NBP Retouch Tools. So it's Nino Batista's retouching toolkit, and some of these are around color grading. So this one I renamed because I needed to run the action twice, and I didn't want one action overlaying the other action. So I actually renamed this, but this is a full random color grading tool. And let me turn it on real quick so you can see what it does to the image. Here we go. So it adds some warmth into the, mostly into the background. I did a little light masking on my skin because I didn't want to turn myself so orange, but I just want to pull up how this tool works. So this is a gradient map, and I chose, I've got some oranges in here, and all I do is I click randomize, and every time I click randomize, which here I'll do it for you just to see how it changes the image, it goes into a different gradient map, and it randomly picks a different color. So why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you're like me and you don't know exactly where you want your color to go to, which is how I operate. Sometimes I know, like I knew I wanted earthy tones, but there's a lot of earthy tones, and this can go in many directions. And sometimes I'm not sure where the mood's going to find me. So I randomize my color, and I can tell you I did this, and it was like the first click I ended up on this color, and I thought, this is a great place to start. I'm going to stay here. But then I thought, well, I've got some oranges in here. Let me try to play with some blues too. So I did the exact same thing, just with the blues. So very specific. I just want to toggle through random blues until I get something I like. So we turned this on, and I get this awesome rich green. So look how it changed, right? It got very rich in tones. It got added some blues in there, which made my greens even kind of blue-greenish. But I masked myself out completely. So this change is not impacting me, my dress, my horns, my hair. And I thought, okay, this is along the lines of the direction I want to be in, but I'm still not quite there. So I went back to the Color Lab and ran an action by the Color Lab, Wolf in the Woods, and we turned it into a little more blue. Again, masked myself out. Now, mind you, I've masked myself out once. I'm just dragging this mask because it's already there, and why recreate the wheel? And I'll show you what my mask looks like. It is very precise. It is very precise because once you start adding in all these colors, they can get muddled, and you don't want your mask to not be correct, because then you'll have maybe blue splotches on your skin, or you'll have bright greens coming out from underneath all the rest of the color in your background. So I mask myself out very meticulously, and then I went in and I wanted to do some lighting up, some texture, some tweaking. So I did a merge visible stamp. I turned this into a smart layer, because I want to be able to go into Camera Raw Filter, make some changes, look at it overall. No, I'm going to change my mind about something and need to go back into it. So the easiest way to do that is, and I was blanking on the word. It's a smart object for all of you that just cringed when I said smart layer. I turn this layer into a smart object so that I can keep going back in and out. So if I wanted to click on Camera Raw Filter, it'll bring up the image as it is, and I can make tweaks to it right from here. So before I knew how to do this, I would bring my whole image back into Lightroom, make these types of changes, then go back into Photoshop, and oh my God, what a mess that is. So I learned how to do this. You don't have to turn your layer into a smart object. You just need a kind of merge visible of your layer. And then you can go up to filters and Camera Raw Filter. My computer's a little slow right now. You can go right up into Camera Raw Filter and make your changes. But if you want to be able to pop out and pop back and not have to do another merge visible or risk messing up what you already did, you can turn your layer into a smart object, and it lets you do all these cool things. So let's turn this on and see what changes I made, because now this is a really dark, like the image is super dark. And when you post a super dark image on Facebook or Instagram or now Threads, it compresses it even more, makes it look a lot darker. So I knew I was going to need to brighten this up because I don't want to look lost. And I want you to see that background, right? Right now it's kind of very lost in everything. So we're going to bring a little bit of that back, and boom, we've got a heck of a lot of texture, which if you follow me, you know I love texture, like to the point of obsession. So I've brought a lot of that texture out in my sad little lawn here, but I brighten the image up. And then the very last step that I took, it's going to be really hard to see. So let me just zoom in mostly on the dress. I would say look at the shadows and the highlights, and I'm going to click on this and I deepen shadows and highlights. That's all I've done in this last layer, is kind of my last kind of oofda in that, is to really bring out, and this is what I do with fabric. So any of my fabric, that flowing fabric that you see on me, any outfits, whenever you have shadows and highlights in the outfits, I am going to emphasize them and give it a much more 3D look, right? Because I want that outfit to jump out at you. I want you to feel like you're in this velvet dress. Like that's just what I do, the way I operate. So this ended up being my final image, right? So here's where we started. We started with some sad little horns on my head, and a very not cohesive colored greenish yellow clover patch of grass. And we turned it into a much more fierce warrior in a mysterious forest somewhere. And I did this with the help of a lot of amazing tools I own. Do you need to buy all those tools? Absolutely not. You can create images and colors in your own world, all on your own, right within Photoshop. I have just over the years decided to ease my burden and be able to play a lot faster. So that's why I own these amazing tools. So if you're interested in any of them, we have actions by the Color Lab. We also have actions and various tools from Infinite Tools. And then we have an array of actions. For here I just use color, but there's a ton of different tools in NBP Retouch Tools. So I can put all that stuff in the description so that you don't have to remember it. But this was the creation of my Courage image, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.